Welcome back to Second Chance Histories, where we explore the extraordinary moments that prove the universe has a way of weaving our deepest desires into tapestries of connection that span across lives in ways we never expected. Today's story takes us to the bedside of a dying man whose final wish seemed impossible to fulfill, yet somehow found its way into the world through the most unexpected pathway imaginable. When 67-year-old Arthur Davidson made his last request, he had no way of knowing that his words would travel beyond the hospital walls to transform the life of a complete stranger who needed hope just as desperately as Arthur needed peace. This is the story of The Last Breath Wish, where a dying man's deepest desire became a living gift that changed not just the life he intended to touch, but the life of someone who would carry his legacy forward in ways he never could have imagined. Arthur Robert Davidson had spent his entire 67 years putting other people's needs before his own. As a career social worker in Portland, Oregon, he had dedicated 4 decades to helping families in crisis, children in foster care, and elderly people navigate the complexities of social services and healthcare. Arthur had never married or had children of his own, not by choice, but because every time he began to build a personal relationship, his work would intervene. There was always one more family in crisis, one more child who needed an advocate, one more elderly person facing bureaucratic obstacles to getting the care they deserved. Arthur has a problem, his supervisor, Helen Martinez, used to joke. He can't say no when people need help. But Helen knew it wasn't really a joke. Arthur's compulsive need to help others had cost him every serious relationship he'd ever begun. His ex-fiancée, Rebecca, had left him 8 years earlier after he had missed their engagement party to help a teenage mother navigate an emergency custody situation. "I can't compete with the entire world for your attention, Arthur," she had said. "You love humanity, but you don't know how to love one person." Arthur had been devastated by the breakup, but even in his grief, when a colleague called needing help with a complex case, Arthur had put on his coat and gone to work. It was the only way he knew how to live. Now, lying in a hospital bed at Oregon Health Sciences University with pancreatic cancer that had spread throughout his body, Arthur faced something he had never experienced. Time with nothing to do but think about his own life, his own needs, his own unfulfilled dreams. The doctors had been honest. He had perhaps 2 weeks left, maybe less. The pain medication kept him comfortable, but there was nothing more they could do medically. Arthur's few remaining relatives lived far away, and his decades of prioritizing work over personal relationships had left him facing death essentially alone. "Is there anything specific you'd like to do with your remaining time?" asked Dr. Patricia Wells, his oncologist. "Anyone you'd like to see, anywhere you'd like to go if you're feeling well enough?" Arthur was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. For 67 years, he had been focused on what other people needed. Now, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, someone was asking him what he wanted. After days of contemplation, Arthur finally found the words to express his deepest, most private desire, something he had never spoken aloud to anyone. "Dr. Wells," he said during one of her evening visits, "I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been thinking about what I really want before I die, and it's probably impossible." Dr. Wells sat down in the chair beside his bed. In 15 years of oncology, she had heard many final requests, from the practical to the seemingly impossible. "Tell me what you're thinking, Arthur. You might be surprised what can be arranged." Arthur looked out the window at the Portland skyline, gathering courage to voice his most private longing. "I've spent my entire life helping other people's children. Foster kids, kids in crisis, teenagers aging out of the system. I've been at hundreds of graduations, weddings, and important moments for children I helped when they were young. But I've always wondered, what would it feel like to have someone call me Dad just once? What would it be like to experience being a father, even if only for a moment?" Dr. Wells felt her throat tighten with emotion. In all her years of caring for terminal patients, she had never heard a request that was both so simple and so heartbreaking. "Arthur," she said gently, "that's not strange at all. That's one of the most beautiful wishes I've ever heard." "But it's impossible, isn't it?" Arthur continued. "I mean, I can't become someone's father in the time I have left. I can't build the kind of relationship that would make that meaningful. It was just something I always wondered about." Dr. Wells promised Arthur that she would think about his request, though privately she struggled to imagine how such a wish could be fulfilled in any meaningful way. How do you arrange for someone to experience fatherhood when they're dying alone with no family relationships? What Dr. Wells didn't know was that Arthur's words had stirred something in her that would lead to an extraordinary chain of events, connecting his dying wish to someone who desperately needed the gift he longed to give. 3 floors below Arthur's room, in the pediatric intensive care unit, 28-year-old Marcus Johnson sat beside the bed of his 6-year-old son, Elijah, who was recovering from emergency surgery following a severe asthma attack that had nearly claimed his life. Marcus was a single father who had been raising Elijah alone since his wife, Carmen, had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. The grief of losing Carmen, combined with the challenges of single parenthood and his struggles to make ends meet as a part-time delivery driver, had pushed Marcus to the breaking point. The current medical crisis had been the final straw. Elijah's asthma had been worsening for months, but Marcus couldn't afford the specialized care his son needed. He had been trying to manage Elijah's condition with over-the-counter medications and emergency room visits when attacks became severe. 3 days earlier, Elijah had suffered his worst attack ever, collapsing at school and requiring emergency intubation. The doctors had managed to save his life, but they made it clear that without proper ongoing care, Elijah faced a future of increasingly dangerous episodes. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Susan Chin, the pediatric pulmonologist, had explained, "Elijah needs specialized asthma management, regular monitoring, and probably some lifestyle changes. This isn't something you can handle with occasional ER visits anymore." But Marcus knew what the doctors didn't understand. He was drowning financially and emotionally. He worked 3 part-time jobs but still couldn't afford health insurance that would cover Elijah's specialized needs. He was behind on rent, behind on utilities, and had been skipping meals to make sure Elijah had enough to eat. More than the financial stress, Marcus was struggling with the emotional weight of feeling like he was failing as a father. Carmen had been the organized one, the one who managed Elijah's medical needs and kept their household running smoothly. Without her, Marcus felt like he was improvising his way through every day, always one step behind the demands of caring for a child with serious health issues. "I don't know how to do this alone," Marcus confided to his sister during one of her rare visits to the hospital. Carmen would have known what questions to ask the doctors, would have figured out how to get Elijah the care he needs. "I feel like I'm failing him every day." What Marcus didn't know was that his whispered conversation in the hospital corridor had been overheard by Dr. Wells, who was walking past on her way to check on Arthur Davidson. The pediatric ward and the oncology ward shared some common areas, and Dr. Wells had noticed Marcus during her previous visits. A young man who looked overwhelmed and exhausted, clearly struggling with circumstances beyond his control. Dr. Wells had been thinking about Arthur's impossible wish for days, wondering if there was any way to help him experience the fatherhood he had never known. Hearing Marcus's quiet desperation, she began to wonder if perhaps Arthur's dying wish and Marcus's desperate need might somehow be connected. Dr. Wells spent the next day thinking about the 2 men in her hospital, Arthur, dying alone and longing to experience fatherhood, and Marcus, overwhelmed by fatherhood and needing guidance and support. She had never attempted anything like what she was considering, and she wasn't even sure it was appropriate. Finally, she decided to speak with Arthur about what she had observed. "Arthur," she said during her evening visit, "I've been thinking about your wish to experience being called Dad, and I might have an idea. It's unconventional, and I'm not sure it's even possible, but I wanted to run it by you." Arthur looked intrigued. "I'm listening." There's a young man in the pediatric ward, a single father who's struggling to care for his 6-year-old son who has severe asthma. The father is overwhelmed, financially stressed, and feeling like he's failing. He keeps saying he doesn't know how to be a good dad without his wife. Dr. Wells paused, watching Arthur's expression. "I was wondering if maybe you might want to meet him. Not as a patient or a client, but as someone who has wisdom about caring for people, about navigating systems, about being strong when things feel impossible." Arthur was quiet for a long moment. "You think I could help him?" "I think you could help each other," Dr. Wells said carefully. "He needs someone who understands how to navigate difficult situations, how to advocate for what a child needs, how to be strong in crisis. And you might experience what it feels like to be the person someone turns to for fatherly guidance." The idea was unprecedented in Dr. Wells' experience, but something about it felt right. Arthur had spent his entire career helping people in exactly Marcus's situation. Single parents overwhelmed by circumstances, people who needed guidance navigating complex systems, families in crisis who needed someone with experience and wisdom to help them find a way forward. "Would he want to meet me?" Arthur asked. "I mean, I'm a dying stranger. Why would he trust me with his problems?" "Let me talk to him," Dr. Wells said. "I think you might be surprised by how much he needs exactly what you have to offer." Dr. Wells approached Marcus carefully the next day, explaining that there was a patient upstairs who had spent his entire career helping single parents in crisis situations, and who might have insights that could help Marcus navigate Elijah's medical needs and the system's challenges he was facing. "I know it sounds unusual," Dr. Wells said, "but Arthur has 40 years of experience helping families exactly like yours. He knows how to work with insurance companies, how to find resources for medical care, how to advocate for children with special needs. And honestly, he could use the company right now." Marcus was initially skeptical, but his desperation outweighed his hesitation. "If there's any chance this person can help me figure out how to get Elijah the care he needs, I'll talk to anyone." That afternoon, Dr. Wells brought Marcus to Arthur's room for what she had described to both men as an informal consultation. What happened next exceeded everyone's expectations. Arthur, despite his weakness from the cancer and chemotherapy, immediately shifted into the role he had played for 4 decades, the experienced professional who could see clearly through complex problems and identify practical solutions. "Marcus," Arthur said after learning about Elijah's condition and their financial situation, "tell me what you've been told about Elijah's treatment plan, and let me see what paperwork you've been given." For the next hour, Arthur reviewed Elijah's medical records with the sharp eye of someone who had spent decades helping families navigate exactly these types of challenges. He identified several resources Marcus hadn't known about: state programs for children with chronic conditions, charitable organizations that helped with medical expenses, and advocacy groups that could help ensure Elijah received appropriate care at school. "Here's what we're going to do," Arthur said, his voice gaining strength as he shifted into problem-solving mode. "First, you're going to apply for emergency Medicaid coverage for Elijah. There's a fast-track process for children with life-threatening conditions that most people don't know about. Second, there's a foundation that specifically helps single parents with children who have respiratory conditions. I'm going to write you a reference letter that will move your application to the top of their list." But more than the practical assistance, something deeper was happening between Arthur and Marcus. Arthur found himself experiencing something he had never felt before: the sensation of being the person someone looked to for fatherly guidance and support. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself relaxing for the first time in months as an experienced, caring adult took charge of helping him navigate the overwhelming challenges he had been facing alone. "You know, Marcus," Arthur said after they had worked through the immediate practical issues, "Being a single parent to a child with medical needs is one of the hardest things anyone can face. The fact that you've kept Elijah safe and loved for 2 years while dealing with your own grief shows me that you're a much better father than you think you are." Marcus felt tears welling up. It was the first time since Carmen's death that anyone had told him he was doing a good job as a father. Over the following days, Marcus began visiting Arthur regularly, initially to work on the applications and paperwork Arthur was helping him navigate, but increasingly just to talk. Arthur had become the wise, supportive presence Marcus had been desperately needing, while Marcus had become the son Arthur had never had. Arthur found himself experiencing all the emotions he had wondered about throughout his childless life. He felt protective concern when Marcus faced setbacks, proud satisfaction when Marcus successfully advocated for Elijah's needs, and deep affection for this young man who had come to trust him with his deepest fears and challenges. "Arthur," Marcus said during one of their conversations, "I want you to know that meeting you has changed everything for me. I was drowning before, feeling like I had no idea how to be the father Elijah needs. But talking with you, learning from you, I feel like I can actually handle this now." Arthur felt a warmth in his chest unlike anything he had experienced before. "Marcus, you've given me something too. For my whole life, I wondered what it would feel like to be someone's father figure, to be the person someone turns to for guidance and support. You've let me experience that." The bond between them deepened when Arthur asked if he could meet Elijah. Marcus brought his son to Arthur's room, and Arthur experienced another first, the sensation of a child looking up to him as a grandfather figure. Elijah, who had been shy and withdrawn since his mother's death, immediately connected with Arthur's gentle manner and genuine interest in his drawings, his school projects, and his fears about his breathing problems. "Mr. Arthur," Elijah said during one visit, "are you like a grandpa? Because I don't have any grandpas, but you feel like what I think a grandpa would be like." Arthur felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. "Elijah, I would be honored to be like a grandpa to you." As Arthur's condition worsened, his time with Marcus and Elijah became the center of his remaining days. But the practical help he had provided was creating ripple effects that extended far beyond their immediate situation. The foundation Arthur had recommended not only approved Marcus's application for financial assistance but offered him a part-time position helping other single parents navigate similar challenges. The job came with health insurance that covered all of Elijah's medical needs and paid enough for Marcus to quit his 3 part-time jobs and have stable income with regular hours. "I don't understand," Marcus told Arthur. "I applied for help, and somehow I ended up with a career helping other people. How did that happen?" Arthur smiled weakly. "When you've been through something difficult and found a way through it, you become valuable to other people facing the same challenges." The foundation realized that a single father who has learned to navigate the system could help other single parents better than someone who has only studied the problems academically. But Arthur's influence on Marcus's life went deeper than practical assistance. Through their daily conversations, Arthur had helped Marcus process his grief over Carmen's death, develop confidence in his parenting abilities, and envision a future where he and Elijah could thrive rather than just survive. "Arthur taught me that being a good father doesn't mean having all the answers," Marcus reflected to Dr. Wells. "It means caring enough to keep looking for solutions and asking for help when you need it. He showed me that love and persistence are more important than perfection." 2 weeks before Arthur died, he asked Marcus to bring Elijah for a special visit. Arthur had prepared something he wanted to give them, a letter he had written to be opened on Elijah's 18th birthday. "Marcus," Arthur said, his voice weak but his eyes bright with purpose, "I want you to know that being part of your family, even for this short time, has been the greatest gift of my life. I got to experience being a father and a grandfather, And I got to see that my 40 years of helping families taught me things that could make a real difference for you and Elijah." He handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "This is for Elijah when he becomes an adult. It's everything I want him to know about his father, about overcoming challenges, about the importance of helping other people." Marcus was crying. "Arthur, I don't know how to thank you. You saved our lives." "No," Arthur said firmly. "You saved mine. You let me experience the most important thing I ever missed out on. You called me the name I always wanted to hear." Marcus looked confused. "What name?" Arthur smiled. "Yesterday, when you were talking to Elijah about asking me for advice, you said, 'Go ask Dad Arthur what he thinks.' You called me Dad Arthur." Marcus realized Arthur was right. Somewhere over the past weeks, he had begun unconsciously referring to Arthur as a father figure, and Elijah had started calling him Grandpa Arthur. "Arthur," Marcus said, "you are Elijah's grandpa. You are like a dad to me. Not like you are." Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who cares, who helps you become who you're supposed to be. Arthur Davidson died peacefully on a Tuesday morning, with Marcus and Elijah holding his hands. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched during his career as a social worker, but Marcus gave the main eulogy, speaking as Arthur's chosen son about the man who had transformed their lives in his final weeks. "Arthur spent his whole life helping other people's children," Marcus said, "but he never got to experience being a dad himself until he met us. In 3 weeks, he taught me more about being a father than I had learned in 6 years of trying to figure it out alone." He got his wish to be called Dad, and we got the gift of having him as our family. But Arthur's impact on Marcus and Elijah was just the beginning. Marcus's new position with the foundation allowed him to help dozens of other single parents navigate similar challenges. Each family he helped represented Arthur's continued influence extending into more lives. Marcus developed a program he called Grandparent Mentors, connecting isolated elderly people with single-parent families who needed guidance and support. The program was based on his experience with Arthur and became a model that was replicated in other cities. "Arthur showed me that people need each other across generations," Marcus explained when the program won a national award for innovation in social services. "Elderly people have wisdom and time that young parents desperately need, and young families have energy and purpose that can give older people's lives new meaning." 5 years after Arthur's death, Marcus had become the director of family services at the foundation that had originally helped him. Elijah, now 11, was thriving with his asthma well controlled and his confidence restored by the stability Arthur had helped create in their lives. But perhaps most remarkably, Marcus had kept detailed records of every family he had helped using the techniques Arthur had taught him. The numbers were staggering. Over 200 single-parent families had received assistance through programs Marcus had developed or directly provided. Dr. Wells, who had facilitated the original meeting between Arthur and Marcus, was amazed by the long-term impact of her unconventional decision to introduce them. Arthur's dying wish was to experience being called Dad just once, Dr. Wells reflected. But what actually happened was that he became a father figure to Marcus, a grandfather figure to Elijah, and indirectly a helping presence in the lives of hundreds of other families. His wish was granted in ways far beyond what any of us could have imagined. Marcus had established an annual award in Arthur's memory for social workers who went above and beyond their job requirements to help families in crisis. The first recipient was Helen Martinez, Arthur's former supervisor, who had nominated Arthur for the honor he had never received while alive. "Arthur never sought recognition for his work," Helen said when accepting the award on his behalf. But his final act, helping Marcus and Elijah, created a legacy that will help families for generations to come. On Elijah's 12th birthday, Marcus shared some of the contents of Arthur's letter with him, feeling the boy was mature enough to understand what Arthur had written about overcoming challenges and helping others. "Grandpa Arthur wrote this when you were 6, Marcus explained to Elijah. "He wanted you to know that even though he was dying, meeting you made him happier than he had ever been in his whole life." Elijah, now a confident preteen who barely remembered his breathing problems, listened thoughtfully as Marcus read Arthur's words about the importance of kindness, perseverance, and using your experiences to help other people. "Dad," Elijah said, the first time he had ever called Marcus Dad instead of Daddy, "do you think Grandpa Arthur would be proud of what we're doing now?" Marcus smiled, thinking of Arthur's legacy living on through their work with other families. "I think he'd be amazed, buddy." His wish was to be a dad and grandpa for just a little while. Instead, he became part of our family forever, and through us, he's still helping other families every single day. Elijah nodded seriously. "When I grow up, I want to help people like Grandpa Arthur did, and like you do now." "I think," Marcus said, "that would make Grandpa Arthur very, very happy." Dr. Wells eventually published a paper about Arthur's case in the Journal of Palliative Medicine, describing it as one of the most successful examples she had encountered of matching a dying patient's psychological needs with opportunities for meaningful connection and legacy creation. Arthur's story demonstrates that end-of-life care should address not just physical comfort, but the psychological and spiritual needs of patients facing death, Dr. Wells wrote. His wish to experience fatherhood seemed impossible to fulfill, but by matching his need to give paternal guidance with a young father's need to receive it, we created a situation where both individuals experienced profound healing. The case study was used in medical schools as an example of creative, patient-centered end-of-life care that looks beyond traditional medical interventions to address the full range of human needs. Dr. Patricia Chin, a researcher studying the psychological benefits of intergenerational relationships, interviewed Marcus and Elijah extensively about their experience with Arthur. What we see in Arthur's case is a perfect example of how dying individuals can continue to create meaningful legacies through relationships formed even in their final days, Dr. Chin concluded. His influence on Marcus and Elijah, and their subsequent impact on hundreds of other families, demonstrates that end-of-life periods can be times of tremendous generative activity rather than simply decline and loss. Today, Marcus Johnson is 35 years old and serves as the executive director of the Arthur Davidson Foundation, a national organization that connects isolated elderly people with young families who need mentorship and support. The foundation has facilitated over 3,000 mentor relationships and helped more than 8,000 families navigate crisis situations. Elijah, now 13, volunteers with the foundation's youth programs and plans to study social work in college. He keeps Arthur's picture in his room and considers himself part of a family that includes a grandfather he knew for only 3 weeks but who changed the trajectory of his entire life. Arthur Davidson's dying wish was granted in the most unexpected way possible. He wanted to experience being called Dad just once, but instead he became a permanent father figure whose influence continues to grow through the lives he touched and the programs created in his memory. The most beautiful thing about Arthur's story, Marcus reflects, is that he thought his wish was impossible because he was focused on what he couldn't have, a lifetime of fatherhood. But what he got was something even more powerful, the chance to be exactly the father that Elijah and I needed, exactly when we needed him most. Arthur's last breath wish reminds us that our deepest desires often find fulfillment in ways we never expected, through connections we never planned, in relationships that transform not just our own lives but the lives of people we may never meet. His legacy proves that it's never too late to become someone's family, never too late to make a difference in someone's life, and never too late for our deepest wishes to find their way into the world through the most extraordinary pathways of human connection. In a world that often focuses on what we cannot have or cannot change, Arthur Davidson's story offers profound hope. Sometimes our most impossible wishes are granted not by getting what we thought we wanted, but by discovering that what we needed to give was exactly what someone else needed to receive. The last breath wish became a first breath blessing, the beginning of a family, a foundation, a legacy, and a love that continues to multiply through every life it touches.